What is elitism and what is empathy? Those are the questions of the day. Welcome back to Shia Sophia, your home for raw, unfiltered, informal science discussions. Wow, I almost gave away some of the topic, like right up at the front. I'm Adrian, climate scientist, crafter, amateur philosopher. Welcome. Let's get into it. So, elitism and empathy, most people might not think of it very much off the top of their heads necessarily as being something relevant to science at all, particularly not the empathy side of things, because we have a process. We're supposed to be on data and evidence and what have you. But where it all really does come in is with science communication in particular. We live in a world now where we're communicating our research all the time through many different means. I mean, scientists themselves will now tweet about their research results, or will be posting on Facebook, or will be doing a number of different things. I'm sure there's probably a few of them on TikTok now, particularly amongst my generation and younger scientists as we go along. But the reason I wanted to talk about it was looking back on a conversation, a question a friend of mine actually had for me last year. She asked me over email, if you were going to give a talk to graduate students interested in doing science communication, what aspect would you talk about? She said she's prepping for spring semester science communication modules. She works at another university, and I've noticed how much graduate students love listening to early career scientists on the topic. They like to know how they wove it into their research and degree time, and also how they make good use of science communication. So it's not the science itself. We still want to maintain that sort of the objective process of going through and having a hypothesis and going through and finding data and evidence and to support it or to refute it, and then going from there and saying, okay, this is the conclusions we draw from. You still have that process. This is more about how we communicate science and how relevant it is. And the ideas of elitism and empathy are not necessarily just limited to climate science. In fact, when I was searching and looking into things for this particular video, the topic of elitism comes up more so when we're referring to the political class, politicians in particular, higher level politicians in Congress or the White House, for instance, is when they've been referring to elites and the idea of elitism. But I want to do in this video, I'm going to give some background on elitism and empathy, but then I'm also going to go ahead and give you my thoughts on what my answer to this question was. Give you basically what my answer to this question was when I wrote back to her. And I was in a particularly philosophical mood at the time. But I'm also going to add in some new things based upon very recent research that just crossed my desk actually today as I was recording, before I was recording this, and get into that. So let's jump right to it. So elitism, as a definition, the advocacy or existence of an elite as a dominating element in a system or society. The attitude or behavior of a person or group who regards themselves as belonging to an elite. Of course, that raises the question, what is an elite? You might think of them as your experts, or some, as most might think of experts, the PhDs, the MDs, and the like that are involved in doing all this kind of high level research, like I am, are themselves could be elites. We wouldn't necessarily consider in society a mechanic to be an elite, though an engineer for certain might be an elite. So that's an interesting question. So how do you define elite? I might leave that up to you a little bit. Here, elitism, there's another good definition actually down here from the Free Dictionary. The belief that society should be governed by a select group of gifted and highly educated individuals, pride or awareness of being part of that elite group. So this gives us a little sense of what most people mean by elite. And when I was doing research for this, elites often came up in the context of politics, in particular when we were talking about politicians at high levels being the elite and running everything. And there's a belief out there that people should be governed by an elite. And I have lots of problems with that myself. I think others might too. But you could also refer to the elite as scientists with advanced degrees or lots of experience, experts in their field. They are elites themselves. Academics, people who spend a lot of their time in academia, have been referred to both positively and negatively as elites. Elitism, another good definition here from the Cambridge Dictionary, the belief that some things are only for a few people who have special qualities or abilities. This is certainly interesting when I think of some of my interactions with academics who think themselves quite a bit better than others because they have the advanced degree or any number of different things in here. So the accusation of elitism seems unfair. There's lots of things. Probably one of my favorites is going through the philosophyterms.com. Elitism is the elite, small, relatively small group with the high status in society and in some domain of activity who have more privileges and power than others due to their status. Elitism is believing in or promoting this sort of arrangement, whether that be in academic or world politics, art, sports, or anywhere else. I have a slightly different take on this and that answer to the question, and we'll get to that in a minute. But this is interesting because some people do argue in favor of elitism that, we should let all the smartest people, all the ones with the advanced degrees and the huge amounts of knowledge and everything be the ones who run society. They're the smartest and strongest and best qualified to lead and wield power. That it is on all of our best interests to have those people at the top. I don't agree with that. The main arguments against elitism is it opposes equality. So you are placing someone special. You're placing someone up on a high pedestal in favor of elitism when you're saying, okay, here, these people are really, really smart. We're going to place them high special and treat them special. And no. Advanced degrees do not make you very special in my boat. They make you different. They make you very, very good experts, but doesn't make you necessarily a better person. It doesn't necessarily... Science, this is going to be a whole other video, I think. Science and being a scientist, that doesn't give you your moral compass. And I don't think it can. It's not supposed to. It's supposed to help you gather knowledge. Wisdom, to me, in a lot of ways, is what are you going to do with that knowledge, and that's where your moral compass comes into play. There's a lot of things that have happened in time connected with science that have been utterly horrific, like eugenics programs, for instance. That was a horrible idea. That was absolutely horrible, utterly wrong. And there were other things around that could be very much the same way, where you had science saying, doing this with this knowledge, it might be good. Morally, it would be abhorrent, depending again on your values that you have for that. And so that's the thing, is science doesn't give you your moral compass. Science doesn't give you what your values are. It can only give you knowledge. That's all that science and the scientific method are really meant to do, is to help you gain knowledge of the objective truth about something. And so this is where it gets interesting. And the reason I have a problem with the idea of elitism is that you're concentrating a lot of power potentially in the hands of very, very few. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. You may go in with good intentions, but when you have all that power to be able to do something and everybody trusting you to do it, that is scary. To put that few people in charge, no matter how smart they are, that doesn't prevent them from having the temptation to use that power in ways that would be utterly abhorrent. As per our usual thing, we'll go into the etymology too while we're at it. Elitism, the advocacy of or preference for rule or social domination by an elite element in the system or society. You're getting the same thing going on here. So with that in mind, we can actually flip over to elite real quick. Chosen, select body, the best part, from the French élite, selection, choice. I butchered that pronunciation. I can't speak French. Pick out, choose from, going all the way back to the Latin eligere, choose, actually, is where the word elite is drawn from. And so that's where that's really a really fascinating thing that you get that. Okay, so that's elitism. And I would point out, and I think for those of you watching the news, you can probably know this, and sometimes it's referred to as anti-intellectualism, but it is also anti-elitism. There's a strong push as we've gotten more populist folks in around that, there's not a big fan of elites at this point. And I don't necessarily have a problem with people being experts and being elites in their field. I have a problem with an attitude that pertains to communication that shows something very interesting, which we'll get to in a minute. Empathy, on the other hand, is very different. The ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And I would actually just shorten this the ability to understand another person would probably be the most cogent, simple way to describe it. In the etymology for empathy, it comes all the way back. If you go back into the Greek, is the root of the word empathia, meaning passion or state of emotion. From the two words you get en being in, but also pathos, feeling. So in feeling is where the root of empathy, the word, comes from. So it has a lot of feeling into it. Elitism has a feeling too, in that you're believing that something is superior because you have a huge number of degrees or lots of experience or any number of different things. You're the top of your field. You're better because of it, or people think you are better because of it. That's where we get into the elitism thing. Empathy is interesting when we get into science because, again, the scientific method itself is designed to be objective. You're not supposed to bring your own biases into it. And the repetition of experiments with peer review and the whole it works is meant to try and mitigate any biases that the individual scientist might have in their preference for what they would want to see. So scientists are very human. I mean, we have our emotional things that we do. So it's not abnormal to consider the idea of empathy in science and science communication, in particular, with the idea that maybe things, I don't know where I was going with that. Sorry, lost my train of thought. I apologize. This is what happens when you're kind of recording live reaction to things, and just spewing your thoughts. Empathetic communication. Yeah, this is a great thing from the Learning Mind. What is empathetic communication? Stephen Covey here, the author of 7 Habits of Efficient People, defines empathetic communication as follows. When I speak of empathetic listening, I want to define a way of listening with the intent to understand. First, listen to understand. Empathetic listening enters the interlocutor's frame of reference, look at the ends, look at the world as he sees it, understand the paradigm, understand what he feels. In essence, empathetic listening does not imply an approving attitude on your part. It means having the fullest understanding, as deep as possible, at the intellectual and emotional level of your interlocutor. I gotta look up the pronunciation for that at some point. Empathetic listening involves more than recording, reflecting, or even understanding the words. Communication experts say that in reality, only 10% of our communication is done through words. Another 30% are sounds, and 60% is body language. Keep that one in mind. 60% is body language. If you're walking in there with your body language saying you're this haughty person, you're not being empathetic. You're walking in with an elitist attitude. If you're a scientist, and if you're not scientist too, and you're walking like, I know this, I don't need an expert's help. It cuts both ways. When listening empathetically, listen with your ears, but actually listen with your eyes and heart. Listen and perceive feelings and meanings. Listen to behavioral language. You will also use the right and left brain hemispheres. Empathetic listening is an enormous deposit into the affective account and has therapeutic healing effect. Empathetic communication, in the simplest definition, means showing the other person that she or he is listened to and their inner universe is being understood. This actually has a lot of tones here of personalism. Actually, when you're looking at it, personalism philosophy actually holds that there is a deep inner person that everybody should strive to understand. So each individual person has their own deep internal self, their soul, if you will, that is unique to them, and you should strive to understand that. So you notice this is all about listening here, because that's an important component of empathy. If you're practicing empathy in science communication, you are listening just as much, and listening very, very seriously, very intently. It's very hard to do, actually. Though I actually want to note an interesting thing. Empathy in science communication is not always thought of as a good. So this is a great study that showed up in Science Daily Summarized from work at the University of California, Davis. Empathy is talked about a lot these days against the backdrop of a global pandemic and a divisive political climate in the United States. Calls for empathy have become louder and more urgent. We encourage empathy for those inflicted with COVID-19 and those struggling with unemployment. We reminisce about the empathy of public figures who have recently passed away. Both Democrats and Republicans have highlighted their own presidential candidates' empathy and accused the other side of lacking it. But do we really want people to show empathy? Not so, said researchers from the University of California, Davis. A recent published paper suggests that although empathy is often portrayed as a virtue, people who express empathy are not necessarily viewed favorably. Now, this has to go with body language. This has to go with communication's a two-way street, right? So I can talk to you all you want, but if I'm not getting my message across and you're not reciprocating that you got the message that I intended to give you, that's something different. So communication is always two-way. And that same is true with science communication. If you're trying to get a message out, you want to make sure you're communicating that appropriately. The interesting thing here is that, where is it? Empathy in the eye of the observer. Although empathy is widely studied, little is known about how people evaluate empathizers when they are not themselves the recipient of empathy. These findings have implications for how empathy operates in the current socio-political climate, where empathy is often touted as a solution to national divisions and strife. Is more empathy always better? Not according to our participants, Dr. Wang said. Our findings suggest that people see empathy as a social signal. Whom you choose to empathize with shows whom you care about and what you stand for. Empathy is, of course, valuable, but it is not a panacea. If people who empathize cross social divides are repudiated, then empathy might reinforce those divides. Then empathy might not always bridge those divides. Instead, it might reinforce them. This is actually a really, really great point. And that's the thing, is that you got to be careful, because with empathy, you can be empathetic to another person, but they're not always going to return that. And communication is a two-way street. You know, if somebody you're empathizing with or trying to, and you're trying to understand them, is just getting all up in your face and being a bitch about it, pardon my French, then yeah, it doesn't matter, and it can always reinforce that divide. That said, you always have to practice knowing that, you know, there's an assumption here that's problematic, in that I guess the way I could describe it is that he's, the author here, I think, is assuming, perhaps, having not read the paper, I do not know, so I'll caveat it that way, that this is just a one-time thing. The thing with empathy is it should be, you don't just stop, right? Unless you get really, really discouraged, as in this initial thing, yeah, you do just stop. But, you know, but it's interesting that you're not always viewed well when doing so. But, and so that level, when you're trying to empathize with someone who has a very different point of view than you do, yes, you can end up with that problem of, you know, I'm just, F it, I'm not going to try. They're not listening to me. They're not doing that. It's a reciprocating thing. You have to be able to show empathy, and you want to see empathy from somebody else, as I guess the best way I can think of to describe it. And in the same boat, the other problem is that if you are trying to empathize with someone who has a very different point of view than you do on the topic, and you have all these other people who share your point of view, or like, why the hell are you talking to that person? Why the hell are you trying to understand? That's the other thing that can happen. You can end up being viewed unfavorably for trying to be empathetic to someone who dislikes. And that's a very powerful sort of peer pressure thing to discourage empathy if you know all of your friends are going to hate you for doing it. And that's interesting because it leads to some very challenging problems, in my view, with respect to science and talking to people who have very different views than scientists do, and right now may view scientists themselves very negatively, or view the elites, however they define elites, as very, very negatively because of point of view differences, but also because they don't feel like they're being heard and understood, and their needs are being met by different elites. So I think that's pretty much it, and what I wanted to talk about from the literature that I had seen. Oh, wait a minute. I forgot I had this one study. I had this one study. I totally forgot. So this is a great little study, Media and Communication 2020. Here, I'll leave this up for a second. Linguistic Reflections on Empathy in Science Communications. Great little study out of Germany. Here, and she talks about the many different types of empathy. It's a very narrow study because it was focused on a blog, but I think it provides some interesting conclusions. So she actually found in discussing empathy, and she's actually encouraging more involvement in it with respect to science communications. She said in the conclusions, in the context of science communication, readers actually expect not only that the experts are qualified and competent, which you would expect them to be, but also that they are prepared to report objectively on science, to substantiate findings, to explain complex issues in greater detail, and to deal openly with uncertainties. When the experts become impatient or respond with irony, and when they do not want to live up to these expectations due to a lack of empathy or due to, at best, egocentric empathy, which is just recognizing that there's differences between people, it's not actually getting empathy in there, the interaction quickly becomes emotionally charged. This, in turn, can be mitigated by the explicit articulation of an expectation or of a willingness to display empathy as a means of returning to the substantive issue as quickly as possible. And yeah, this is true. Here, I've seen this one happen when scientists just blow off the people asking them questions. It may be a crazy question, but don't blow them off. It's a question that means something to that person that you're talking to. That's a stupid idea to blow somebody off. I mean, I've actually, on Locals, I've gotten into such great conversations on climate change with a whole group of folks I've met on Locals, and just like answering questions left, right, and center. Never once did I blow them off, or I hope I didn't blow them off. That's a good question. Maybe I should ask them that. But But people do get really upset when you do that. They feel like they're not being heard. They're not being understood. Point here. She went on here, concluded, the evaluation of the interviews and analysis of the comments demonstrate that emotionality is almost inevitable when people with different, hierarchically perceived roles meet, and the scientific content of their communication is complex, socially relevant, and possibly also characterized by uncertainties on both the cognitive and decision-making levels. This is also because in such communicative contexts, the most diverse expectations collide, heavily influencing direct communicative action in the form of reciprocal expectations of expectations, which is really... Empathy also appears to be a possible way to resolve or even avoid the resulting communicative conflicts, instead of engaging in more emotional communication. It would be therefore worthwhile to take a closer look at empathy in science communication, not only by means of linguistic methods, but also by interdisciplinary approaches to communication science, other social sciences, and the humanities. I would add actually a bunch of physical sciences in there now too, particularly climate science where I am. So empathy is a good thing. Generally speaking. And elitism, depending upon where you look, I actually did find some interesting scholarly articles. I don't have them here, but found some interesting scholarly articles where people were talking about elitism as being a good thing. I, as you might have guessed, don't agree. And with that in mind, I want to get back to my friend's initial question and go and actually answer her question in my own words, and I will read it off for you and go into a little bit more depth, actually, into why I thought this. So I hope you're doing well. To answer your question, well, there's probably lots of aspects I would talk about, and this is true. I would have lots of things I would talk about. That said, if I had to narrow it down, then I would consider a pair of diametric opposites, elitism and empathy. I have observed a tendency on the part of academics and experts more broadly to presume that they know all, and it's their job to inform the uneducated public on what they should do. This is an attitude of elitism that, although perhaps comes from good intentions, it is very unwise to have as part of any communications. The attitude of elitism tends to leave experts saying or implying that they, or scientists, know best and others should listen and do as they say. Elitism is arrogant and condescending. It ends up communicating to the public the air of, you should do this, or you should do that. This attitude is unwelcome to many, myself included. I don't like it when people do this to me, who recognize full well that perhaps the expert speaking is an expert in their field, but they are not an expert in my life. Now, if you go back to my What is an Expert video, I did talk about this a fair bit. Experts definitely can be very much experts in their fields, but in recognizing that they're not necessarily experts in somebody else's life. And you need to make sure you're not being arrogant and condescending is my point in this. This is why I don't like elitism. People who think of themselves as better because they have the expert knowledge or they have the degree or they have whatever kind of awards or anything like that. I don't like those people. I really don't, because you think yourself better than me or better than somebody else because you have that expertise. Sorry, I'm not going to listen to you if that's the attitude I get from you, and not just from your spoken word, from your body language. Remember the other thing, 60% of communication is body language here. So if you're coming in with the attitude, with the highfalutin attitude, when you got to read a room. You know, if the room is relaxed, be relaxed. You may still be in a nice outfit or whatever, but be relaxed with people. Wrap in things. Anyway, as such, coming across with an air of elitism is likely to be met with rejection, resentment, and distrust. I've considered this aspect a lot of late in discussions with some who fail to consider how different it is to live in academia than it is to live in the real world. I consider it a blessing that I have many friends who only have high school diplomas, but I would consider them as smart or smarter than many with PhD degrees. They remind me of just how poor an attitude elitism is. The elitist attitude doesn't seek to communicate with the audience. They only seek to tell the audience what they should do. Most people, myself included, hate being told what they should do, particularly when their advice is unsolicited. Don't tell me what the hell I should do. I don't appreciate it. I can make my own decisions. Thank you very much. I'm a very competent person. I'm not crazy. I got my own values, my own worldview, my own decision making. I've been doing just fine by myself for a bit here and now. And, I don't need you to tell me. And this includes with media too. Actually, this is a good example of an elitist attitude that drove me the freak so pissed off with this person. I'm still annoyed with them for doing this. It's like I posted something on Facebook myself. Saying, hey, this person's got good perspective. And I immediately got an attitude back from a friend of mine of, well, you shouldn't post that clearly biased stuff here. I was like, first off, who the fuck are you? You don't get to tell me what I should or should not do. I'm sorry. Tough luck. I know that's your opinion, but you don't get to tell me that. I don't care what you have to say. And at the same time, this person demonstrated another problem I have with an elitist attitude. He didn't even bother to listen to the video I put up there. Wasn't me, actually. It was a video from Tim Pool, actually. I thought he had an interesting perspective, so I thought, hey, share it. But this person didn't even bother to listen. He just said, that's such a clearly biased headline. An elitist attitude will mouth the platitudes to me. They will mouth the platitudes of having a desire to hear from diverse perspectives and then be really upset when it's a diverse perspective they don't like. Be really upset when it's a diverse perspective that contradicts what they think or how they think the world should be. And this person does not have a PhD. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to do it. And it's because it's between me and him, but this is a good example for this. But, I saw it later. He mouthed the platitudes in a different Facebook post that he wanted to hear from diverse perspectives. And I was sitting there like, what the fuck, man? You did not want to hear from diverse perspectives at all because you didn't want to hear from a different perspective that I shared with you in a video that you could have watched. You didn't even bother. That's an elitist attitude right there. I'm not interested in diverse perspectives. I'm not interested in this. I know what the world holds. I'm going to find the answer. I'm going to tell you what it is. And too bad if you don't like it. I'll go fuck off is my reaction to that. Anyway, you can see I've got lots of problems with elitist attitudes aside from the issue of, concentrating a huge amount of power in the hands of very few would be a very bad idea with elitism. But the attitude of elitism, being arrogant, being condescending, saying you know best, mouthing a platitude that you want to hear from diverse perspectives and then telling me that, and then saying, oh, no, but not that diverse perspective, not that perspective. Whatever. Go away. I listen to different perspectives all the time. I listen to far left. I listen to far right. I listen to everything in the middle that I can get my hands on when I don't need to be focused on writing or doing analysis. I try and get a hold of everything. It's like I was playing MSNBC versus Fox at the same time on the Echo this morning with my morning news brief. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's a tangent. On the other hand, In contrast is a very different attitude, the attitude of empathy. This is very much the opposite of elitism. To have empathy in communication is to have an air of compassion and understanding. It is an attitude and presentation that shows that, yes, you are an expert. You can still recognize yourself as an expert. I'm not saying, I would never say don't do that. But also recognizes the limits of your expertise. The empath knows that they are an expert in only so much and seeks to understand as much as to be understood. Think of the prayer of St. Francis with that one is what came to mind when I wrote it. This is why I focus so much in my recent Climate 101s and saying that, quote, you, my audience, know your own situations best, and I would never presume to tell you what to do, but I'm here to help if you need me. This is an approach based in empathy and willingness to connect with my audience on a deeper level than simply giving a talk and moving on. It's also the same reason why I try to wrap my humor and style so people can know me as a person, not me as the scientist. Getting across in even the smallest way that you, the communicator, truly care about the audience as unique individuals makes a tremendous difference. An air of empathy is likely to be met with acceptance, respect, and trust. The empathetic approach also follows through and continues to connect and maintain that line of communication. When I think of the approach of empathy in communication, I think of St. Teresa of Calcutta. Mother Teresa, for those of you who aren't Catholic. Mother Teresa was canonized as a saint in the Catholic Church. So St. Teresa for the Catholics. The people who spoke with St. Teresa remember well that when she spoke to them, they were in that moment the only person that mattered. She was so focused. She was an absolute... The stories about St. Teresa are amazing with how she interacted with people because she was dead on focus. When you were there in front of her, talking with her, you were the most important person. She made you feel like the most important person. And she made sure that she understood and she got you and she was trying her damnedest. I don't pretend to be perfect at anything, but I have observed carefully how wonderful empathy is in communication and how horrific elitism is. I prefer to strive for the former, not the latter. People in audiences are very capable of picking up on which of the two someone tends toward, as people are also very good at detecting pandering too. This is very true. Most people are very good at detecting when they've been pandered to, and most people don't like it, at least from what I can tell. And this goes back also to the thing that I just mentioned with the empathetic communication, that 60% of your communication is your body language, and then after that, the rest of that is spoken word. I think to varying degrees. I forget what it is. It's like 10% of one kind and 30% of the other, or something like that. I'm forgetting the exact number. We can roll back in the video at some point. So yeah, they're very, very capable of picking up on body language. If you're coming in there as this haughty person, good job. You've brought your air of elitism before you even said a word. But practicing empathy and being relaxed and coming to people as a person, that's a really important thing, and people can pick up on that. So to finish up, so it is a constant practice for communication to recognize the unique individuals and their needs and wants, to be present in that moment with those people as the most important ones to you, the speaker, to consider all those individuals as equals with their unique expertise and share your expertise with them. This is really important. Consider people as the individuals that you're talking to, the individual decision maker, the individual scientist, if you're coming at it from the decision maker perspective, or whomever you're talking to. They're unique individuals. They're amazing. Don't ever make assumptions about them based on what you look at a first look. Like me, hey, you wouldn't guess I'm a PhD scientist. I walk around in tattered jeans and a t-shirt. And this, of course, now getting very holy, hoodie all the time. You never know I was a PhD scientist. I'm not going to make that judgment of anybody walking down the street. I don't know who that person is. Could be a scientist, could be a politician, could be an expert, could be the local busboy, any number of different things. Don't make that assumption. They're all unique individuals with their unique expertise, their unique backgrounds and things like that. Really try to do in that moment, show that you want to understand people. That's the air of empathy that I think is really, really important. And what makes it all the more important to me, it's been my observation that those who practice empathy succeed and being great communicators, and those who practice elitism fail spectacularly. If you're coming across as the arrogant creep, you might be popular in some circles with your scientific community, but you're not going to be popular talking with the public. I gotta tell you. It doesn't work. At least that's not been my observation going around here. Others may disagree, and hey, comment if you disagree. I'd love to hear it. One of the reasons, though, that empathy has gotten to be really, really important to me is a really recent study. So this comes from the Center for the Study of Perception and Ideology, I believe is the full name here. This was just released today here, March 1st of 2021. And what caught my attention with this is really the first study of its kind where it's done a lot of survey work with academics in the United States and Canada and Britain to get at what kind of hostile environments there might be in higher ed and academia. And the reason I bring this up is just in the broader picture of science communication and in general with the public and the country that we have right now, and the country that we're in right now and how polarized it is. Things that happen on campus do eventually trickle out into the real world. Strangely enough, not enough of the real world gets back into academia, but that's a whole other thing in here. So this was actually the first of its kind to investigate political discrimination in academia, relying on survey responses from perpetrators and targets both. And what caught my attention was some pretty horrific things that, you know, for some of the folks who are more conservative, who aren't in academia, they do perceive this kind of thing where they see that maybe there's not a whole heck of a lot of people in academia. And, you know, for me, I talked about this in the intro video for this channel. Being a conservative in academia sucks some days. It really, really sucks where you get some of these implicit things that trying to discourage you from ever expressing your own viewpoints or things like that, and people being as open as they are, and but others don't feel like they can be. So first of its kind, this is from the executive summary for the report, and I will link this. It's really, really interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing some of the commentary because it is so new. I don't know that anybody's done some serious looks at rebuffing it or rebutting it or things like that. I'd love to see it if it comes up and comes across my channel. It comes across my channel wires. I will gladly take a look at it and see if it makes some good points about the study. But this was an interesting conclusion for one. Anglophone countries, referring to the US, Britain, and Canada, significant portion of academics discriminate I can't talk, against conservatives in hiring, promotion, grants, and publications. Okay, that's an immediate problem. Right-leaning academics experience a higher level of institutional authoritarianism and peer pressure. In the United States, over a third of conservative academics and PhD students have been threatened with disciplinary action for their views, while 70% of conservative academics report a hostile departmental climate for their beliefs. And I'm not surprised, to be honest, as someone who's been in that position. That matches up actually with my own anecdotal experience a fair bit. It's not necessarily fun to be in academia when for as much as they trumpet academic freedom, intellectual freedom, there's a lot of things there. And this is actually what's really, really concerning. Younger academics and PhD students, especially in the United States, are significantly more willing than older academics to support dismissing controversial scholars from their posts, here indicating that the problem of progressive authoritarianism will likely get worse. This is a big concern to me, because these young academics and PhD students that are doing this, I probably fall into that designation of being young. I would never support dismissing a controversial scholar from their post. I'm a free speech absolutist myself. They have every right to say whatever crazy stuff they want. I have every right to speak with my own voice and say that's crazy. But this says to me that these academics are not practicing empathy. They're not being taught empathy at all when they're doing science communication. They're not willing to understand people. They're insulated in the academic environment and not getting out there and actually understanding people who have a very different worldview and live a very different life from what they do. They're very, very... In academia, you have the privilege of the ivory tower. You can come up with whatever crazy thought or idea that you want. You don't get out there and understand what that idea necessarily means in the real world. And that's like something I got a problem with. But you're not getting out there to understand and empathize with people. And this last one of the bullets that I want to highlight is really something that really concerns me. A hostile climate plays a part in deterring conservative graduate students from pursuing careers in academia. Conservative and liberal graduate students differ far more in their perceptions of whether their politics fit in academia than they do on questions related to how well academia pays, the isolating nature of their work, and other aspects of the profession. This I have observed. I have actually spoken with a few folks who abandoned their PhDs, abandoned doing their degrees because they felt like they could not speak their minds. They felt like the academic culture was so intolerant, was so elitist, arrogant, condescending. You have to believe this particular worldview, this particular point of view, that they left. And they're brilliant people. That's what breaks my heart in this, is they're brilliant people, but you're forcing them out because you're not willing to have empathy. You're not willing to practice empathy and actually understand somebody else's worldview and not condemn them for it and not harass them for it. And this is extremely concerning to me, that a lot of graduate students who are conservative, and conservatives have their own unique worldview that might have them frame questions for scientific research differently than others, or be willing to challenge assumptions and things that others may not. And you might be making them run away. I've had this feeling about this for a long time, but this is the first study to some degree, even though this is a report out of an institution, it's not necessarily peer reviewed. So, I mean, take that as you will, but this is the first one that's come across with the same feeling that I have, that this is where I'm worried, is that the lack of empathy in science communication that is developing and has been developing for some time, seems to be pushing people away who would be great, brilliant scientists, because they have a different worldview, because they have a different way of different values than folks who are progressive. And that's really, really concerning. Actually, that is really tremendously concerning. And so, I worry about that. And that's something that really, really bothers me. And because there's a lack of empathy for different worldviews in academia, that trickles out into the real world, because students are going to graduate with their high degrees and not have empathy for people who have different worldviews than them, but also maybe mechanics, or maybe plumbers, or maybe local officials, or maybe any number of different things, who don't have the same level of degrees that they do, and they think they're better because they got those degrees, and the horrible elitist attitudes. So not being able to maintain unique, diverse worldviews and intellectual diversity in academia is a concern for me in the long-term future of science. And that's, I think, where it gets really, really concerning for me. And I really, really hope that there is a return to practicing empathy, or starting to teach people to practice empathy. You know what I would love? Because I did this in undergrad. I did a lot of service trips. Every spring break, I didn't go to party. I went out on service trips. I ended up working with homeless people. I worked with homeless people in Philadelphia. I worked with people who lost their homes after Katrina in New Orleans and St. Bernard Parish in Louisiana. I worked with all of these different people, and it was so, I think looking back on it, it was so wonderful, because it was a reminder that I'm sitting up here in my privileged perch in academia, but somebody else is going to have a very different worldview from me, because they aren't in academia, because they aren't doing those things. They're going to be liberals, progressives, conservatives, libertarians, all that, different, unique and different worldviews. And I love hearing from all of these things. I'm a weirdo. I love hearing from all of these different things. I might get annoyed with you. Absolutely, I might get annoyed with you. I might not say anything, but I might get annoyed with you, and I might not. I might be like, that's a really good idea. Really good thought. Actually, I hadn't considered that before. Because different worldviews do make you think that way. It gives you different insights in how the world works. And empathy is the only way that you can get at that, to make sure that you are actually understanding people and where they are. And I think the other thing with empathy is important to understand here is that there's a line from the Prince of Egypt in the song Through Heaven's Eyes. I think I got the name of the song right. But the singer says, "Does the stone that sits at the very top of the mountain's mighty face think it's more important than the stones that form the base?" Meaning the base of the mountain. An elitist would say, yes, that stone on the top is really, really important. But somebody who's empathetic, would be looking at everybody on every stone at the base of the mountain with empathy. Because on the one hand, they're taking all the pressure, and perhaps everybody at the bottom is looking at the top and realizing, wow, that guy up there, that rock up there is really, really cold because he gets buffeted by all that wind and all the weather and things like that, and I don't necessarily have to deal with that down here at the bottom. Remember, I think a key with empathy is remembering that no matter what degrees you have, no matter where you come from, what kind of expertise you have, what kind of job you have, all that kind of stuff does not make you any better than anybody else. I do not consider myself any better than anybody else. I don't consider my expertise the thing that defines me as valuable as a human being. Don't get me wrong, I'm really proud of my PhD. I'm proud of that after working my butt off to get it. But it's not the most important thing. And that's why empathy, I think, is incredibly important in science and science communication, because particularly with all the crazy problems that we have, whether it be climate change or the COVID pandemic or what have you, you have to have empathy for people, the scientists who have to make some really tough decisions. But also people who are scientists and elites and what have you need to have a lot of empathy for the people who are suffering, who've lost jobs, who've any number of different things. And that's what's lacking. And remembering that no amount of degrees, no amount of knowledge, no amount of expertise makes you any better than anyone else. Period. End of sentence. Gives you a unique skill set, and people should listen because you've got that unique skill set. But it doesn't make you a better person, and you need to not have that attitude of elitism that you're better because you have this expertise and ability. And the same goes for anybody else who's not a scientist too, because yes, you're an expert in your own life and all that. Just don't think that it makes you any better than anybody else, because it doesn't. Okay, I think that's it. That's my random rant. I think I went for about 50 minutes again, which will be a great, nice long bit. Long form thing seems to be my thing. So that's what I think. I prefer empathy when it comes to science communication, and I try very hard to treat anybody I'm talking to as an individual, as the unique, beautiful individual they are, created in the image of God. And, not treat them any worse because they're different from me, or they don't have the degree. They are the amazing people that they are. And I love learning from every single one of them. Every single moment is a learning experience. Anyway, please like, share, subscribe, all that good jazz if you like this content. Comment. Tell me what you think about elitism and empathy and all those wonderful things that we just talked about. And then from there, I would say also, if you want more interactions with me, of course, head over to cyworthy.locals.com, cyworthy.locals.com for more interactions direct with me. I will be probably doing some exclusive content up on cyworthy.locals.com at some point. There, join as a supporter. We'll be doing our next Cyworthy conversation, recording that here at some point this week. I think that's going to be on different experimental methods, where we're just going to talk over those different experimental methods and their ins and outs and goods and bads and all that kind of stuff. We'll probably get into the difference between modeling and empirical studies and paleo studies and things like that. That ought to be fun. And yeah, I think that's it. So until next time, my friends, this is Adrienne signing off. Stay curious, my friends.